At exactly 7:43 in the evening, on a quiet residential street in Decatur, Georgia, a routine drive home from work turned into a 6-minute encounter that would shake an entire police department to its foundation. The dashcam footage, later obtained through a public records request, would rack up over 47 million views across social media platforms within a single week. Legal scholars shared it. News anchors played it on repeat. Law school professors assigned it as required viewing. But this wasn't your typical police encounter video. This was different. This wasn't a story about someone screaming at officers or making threats or resisting. This was the story of a man who sat perfectly still, spoke in a calm and measured voice, knew exactly what the law said, and watched as the entire situation collapsed around the very officers who started it. This was the story of Marcus Webb, a 34-year-old paralegal who, in 6 minutes on a Tuesday evening, changed the lives of everyone involved, including himself. What happened next would shock the Decatur Police Department, spark a federal civil rights investigation, and prove once and for all that knowledge is the most powerful thing a person can carry in this country. Before we continue, can you do me a favor? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, because this story gets significantly more intense, and you absolutely do not want to miss what happens next. Marcus Webb was not your average 34-year-old. While most people his age were scrolling through social media or watching Netflix after work, Marcus was reading case law. He was annotating Supreme Court decisions. He was the kind of man who had a copy of the Fourth Amendment taped inside his kitchen cabinet, not as a political statement, but because he genuinely believed that knowing your rights was the same kind of survival skill as knowing how to swim. Marcus grew up in South Atlanta, the second of 4 children, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs and never once complained about it. He watched her get talked down to by landlords, by bosses, by people in positions of authority who assumed she wouldn't push back. That image never left him. It quietly shaped everything he became. He had spent the last 6 years working as a senior paralegal at a mid-sized civil rights law firm in downtown Atlanta called Holloway & Green. He had assisted on over 200 cases involving unlawful stops, illegal searches, and civil rights violations. He had reviewed thousands of pages of police reports, body camera transcripts, and internal affairs documents. He knew how these encounters worked. He knew what officers were trained to say, what they were legally allowed to do. And perhaps more importantly, he knew exactly where the line was and when someone crossed it. Marcus had never been in trouble with the law. Not so much as a speeding ticket. He drove a silver 2019 Honda Accord that he kept immaculately clean. He was on his way home from a 12-hour workday, still wearing his button-down shirt and dress slacks, a legal brief sitting in the passenger seat beside him. He had leftover pasta from a restaurant in a takeout bag on the back seat. He was thinking about nothing more dangerous than a hot shower and a quiet evening. He had no idea that someone, somewhere, had just robbed a convenience store. On that Tuesday evening in late October, Marcus left his office at 7:28 p.m. and took the same route home he always took east on Ponce de Leon Avenue, then south through the quiet streets of the Belvedere Park neighborhood. The trees along Glenwood Road had started turning that deep amber color, and the streetlights were just beginning to flicker on as the Georgia sun dipped behind the tree line. Everything was still. Everything was ordinary. At 7:31 p.m., approximately 2 miles away from where Marcus was driving, a man in a silver Honda Civic had walked into a corner mart convenience store, pointed a weapon at the cashier, taken the contents of the register, and fled northbound. The description that went out over police radio was brief silver Honda, male driver, dark jacket, heading north on Glenwood. Marcus Webb drove a silver Honda. Marcus Webb was wearing a dark jacket over his dress shirt. Marcus Webb was heading north on Glenwood Road. He was not speeding. He was not swerving. He was not on his phone. He was not doing anything that would give any officer probable cause to stop him for a traffic violation. He was simply driving both hands on the wheel. Turn signals used correctly, completely within the law. He was just a man going home, in the wrong car, on the wrong street, at the wrong moment. Then the lights came on behind him. Marcus looked in his rearview mirror and saw the blue and red strobes of a patrol unit closing in fast. His stomach did not drop with fear. His hands did not shake. What Marcus felt in that moment, and he described this later in an interview, was a very specific kind of alertness, like his brain quietly shifted gears. He took a breath, put on his hazard lights, and began to pull over to the right side of the road. Slowly, deliberately, just like the law required. He had no idea that 2 more patrol units were already moving to box him in from the front. The officer who initiated the stop was Derek Callahan, a 12-year veteran of the Decatur Police Department. Callahan had a reputation in the department for being aggressive during high-stress calls. He wasn't a bad man, by most accounts. He was simply a man who, after more than a decade on the job, had developed the unshakable confidence that comes from almost never being seriously challenged. He had responded to dozens of armed robbery calls. He knew how they went. You find the car, you contain it, you get the suspect out. Fast and loud. That formula had worked for him before. He was about to meet someone who had spent 6 years studying exactly what that formula looked like on paper and exactly where it broke the law. Callahan's cruiser stopped behind Marcus's Accord. 2 additional units pulled up one in front, blocking the road, one on the driver's side. 3 officers total, with 2 more on the way. Callahan stepped out with his hand on his weapon and walked toward the driver's side window. His body camera was rolling. He later said he thought the stop would take 4 minutes. "Driver, show me your hands right now. Keep them where I can see them." Marcus raised both hands slowly, pressing them flat against the inside of the windshield so every camera could see them clearly. His voice, when he spoke, was almost unnervingly calm. "Both hands are visible, officer. I am not a threat. May I ask the reason for this stop?" Callahan ignored the question. "Step out of the vehicle." "Officer, am I being detained or am I free to go?" This is where things immediately started to go sideways for Callahan. That question, am I being detained or am I free to go, is not an aggressive question. It is not a hostile question. It is a legally precise question, and it requires a legally precise answer. Most people never ask it. Most people simply comply, hand over their documents, and absorb whatever happens next. Marcus Webb was not most people. "You are being detained. Step out of the vehicle, sir." "I understand I am being detained. I will comply with lawful orders. Before I exit, I want to state clearly for the record that I have committed no traffic violation. I am not armed, and I am invoking my Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizure. I will cooperate fully. I am opening the door now, slowly." Callahan did not respond to any of that. He grabbed the door handle himself and pulled it open. "Stop talking. Get out. Now." Marcus stepped out calmly. He kept his hands visible. He did not reach for anything. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood beside his car on a quiet residential street in Decatur, Georgia, with the same quiet precision of a man who had spent years reading police reports and knew exactly what every second of this footage was going to look like later. "Sir, I need you to place your hands on the roof of the vehicle." "Yes, sir." Marcus complied immediately. Officer Callahan began a pat-down. A second officer, whose name badge read Peterson, moved toward the passenger side of the car and shone a flashlight through the window. He saw the legal brief on the seat. He saw the takeout bag. He saw a phone in the cup holder. "Is there anything in this vehicle I should know about?" Callahan asked. "There is a legal brief from my employer, Holloway & Green, in the passenger seat. There is a takeout bag with food from a restaurant. There is my cell phone in the cup holder. There are no weapons, no narcotics, and no contraband of any kind. Officer, I want to be clear, do you have a warrant to search my vehicle?" "We have reason to believe this vehicle matches the description of a vehicle used in an armed robbery." "Officer, vehicle description alone does not constitute probable cause for a warrantless search under the Fourth Amendment. I know you know that. I am not giving consent to search this vehicle." Callahan stepped back slightly. That slight step back, you can see it clearly on the body camera footage. It was involuntary. It was the physical response of a man who had just heard something he wasn't expecting. Callahan turned to Peterson. The two exchanged a look. Then Callahan turned back to the car, walked to the passenger window, and reached into his jacket for his baton. "We're going to need to look inside for officer safety." Officer, I have not consented to a search. I am recording this interaction. If you smash that window, you are destroying private property without a warrant and without consent. I am asking you not to do that. The baton swung. The passenger window shattered into the seat, glass scattering across the legal brief, across the takeout bag, across the interior of a car that belonged to a man who had done absolutely nothing wrong. Marcus did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. He simply said very quietly, "I am noting for the record that Officer Callahan has just destroyed private property without a warrant and without my consent. The time is 7:43 p.m. Quick question for you watching right now. If you were in Marcus's exact position, hands on the roof of your car, 3 officers surrounding you, would you have said what he just said? Drop a comment below. I genuinely want to know." And then the radio crackled. This is the moment that changes everything. 7 minutes and 14 seconds into the encounter, according to the body camera timestamp, the dispatcher's voice came through clearly enough that both the body camera and Marcus's own phone, which had been recording from inside the cup holder, picked it up without distortion. "All units, be advised robbery suspect from the Corner Mart incident is in custody. Repeat, suspect is in custody. Apprehended at the Sunoco on Flat Shoals Avenue. Silver Honda Civic, suspect matched, confirmed. All units stand down on the vehicle search." Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind of silence that fills a room right after something irreversible has happened. Callahan stood there with his baton still in his hand. Glass from Marcus's window still catching the light at his feet. Peterson had gone completely still on the other side of the car. The third officer, whose name was Rodriguez, had taken 3 steps back and was staring at the pavement. Marcus Webb slowly turned his head and looked directly at Officer Callahan. "Officer, dispatch just confirmed your suspect is already in custody. That means I was never your suspect. That means you just destroyed my property without cause, without a warrant, and without consent. So tell me, whose rights did you just violate?" Callahan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. "I'd like my identification back, please. And I'd like the name and badge number of every officer present at this scene." The body camera footage shows Callahan looking at the ground for a full 4 seconds before he responds. 4 seconds doesn't sound like a long time until you're watching a 12-year law enforcement veteran realize in real time that he has no ground left to stand on. You could see it in the way his shoulders dropped. You could hear it in the way his voice changed when he finally spoke quieter, slower, stripped of the commanding certainty that had defined every second of this encounter up to that point. He handed Marcus his identification back without a word. Marcus took it. He looked at it. He looked at Callahan. And then he said something that wasn't angry, wasn't triumphant, wasn't designed to humiliate. It was just true. "I told you I hadn't done anything wrong. I told you this before you broke my window. I told you before you searched this car. I told you before your department spent 6 minutes treating me like a criminal for driving home from work in my own vehicle. I'm going to need a full incident report, the names and badge numbers of all officers present, and your supervisor's contact information. I'll be in touch." He got back in his car. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment, surrounded by the glass from his own window, the October air now coming through the empty frame and hitting his face. He picked up his phone from the cup holder, still recording, and looked directly into the lens. "Everything that just happened is documented," he said quietly. "Everything." The entire encounter had lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes that would end Derek Callahan's career and permanently alter the trajectory of an entire police department. Now, most people who experience what Marcus experienced that evening might have driven home shaking. They might have called a family member, vented about it, maybe filed a complaint online that went nowhere. But Marcus Webb worked at a civil rights law firm. He had spent 6 years preparing other people for exactly this kind of fight. He wasn't about to start handling his own situation any differently. By 9:30 that same night, still with glass in his hair, Marcus had written and begun organizing a formal complaint that read less like a citizen grievance form and more like a legal brief prepared by a senior attorney. It cited specific case law. It referenced the body camera timestamp evidence he had already begun requesting through the Georgia Open Records Act. It named each officer individually. It outlined 4 specific constitutional violations with supporting legal citations for each one. It was 31 pages long. The Decatur Police Department's Internal Affairs Division received Marcus's complaint at 8:14 the following morning. By noon, Officer Derek Callahan had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. This was not normal. Typically, these investigations take weeks before any administrative action is even considered. But Marcus's complaint was so thoroughly documented, so precisely organized, and so legally airtight that the department's legal counsel reportedly told the chief that they had no defensible position, and the faster they moved, the better it would look. Do you think the department made the right call by acting that quickly? Let me know in the comments. Internal Affairs pulled every piece of available footage within 48 hours. The body camera from Callahan, the body camera from Peterson, the body camera from Rodriguez, the dash cam from all three patrol vehicles, and the phone footage from Marcus's own device, which his attorney formally submitted as evidence. The investigator, a 15-year department veteran named Captain Sandra Okafor, watched the footage in sequence, from first lights to the moment Marcus drove away. Then she watched it again. Then she called in the deputy chief to watch it with her. What the footage confirmed was every single thing Marcus had documented. The lack of individualized probable cause beyond a generic vehicle description. The failure to answer Marcus's lawful question about detention. The warrantless destruction of private property. The absence of exigent circumstances that would legally justify bypassing consent or a warrant. The continued detention of a clearly innocent man for several minutes after dispatch had confirmed the real suspect was already in custody. But there was something else the footage captured that made the case considerably more serious. In the final 2 minutes of Peterson's body camera footage, after the radio confirmed the suspect was caught, Peterson could be heard whispering to Rodriguez quietly, but not quietly enough. "We probably should have waited on that window." Rodriguez responded, "Yeah." Neither of them reported the exchange in their incident reports. Neither of them mentioned it in their initial statements to Internal Affairs. That omission, that quiet two-word conversation that both officers chose not to disclose, elevated the case from a policy violation to a potential integrity violation. The investigation concluded in 19 days. For a formal Internal Affairs investigation involving multiple officers and potential civil rights implications, 19 days is extraordinarily fast, but as Captain Okafor later noted in a departmental memo, there was simply very little to investigate. The evidence was complete, chronological, and undeniable. Marcus's documentation had done most of the investigative work before the department even opened the file. Everything was on camera, everything was time-stamped, everything was undeniable. The department's official findings were released in a formal statement on a Wednesday morning. Officer Derek Callahan was found to have violated department policy on use of force, unlawful property destruction, and failure to establish individualized probable cause before escalating a stop. Officer Peterson and Officer Rodriguez were found to have submitted materially incomplete incident reports, which the department characterized as a failure of professional integrity. The department recommended Callahan's termination. Peterson and Rodriguez received 30-day suspensions without pay and mandatory retraining. Derek Callahan resigned before the termination could be formally processed. His 12-year career with the Decatur Police Department ended because of 11 minutes on a Tuesday evening. 11 minutes that would have been completely invisible had Marcus Webb been anyone else. The department initially resisted releasing the full body camera footage to the public, citing an ongoing review process. Marcus's attorney filed an Open Records Act request within 72 hours. The department responded with a redacted partial release. The attorney filed an appeal. Within 10 days, a Superior Court judge ordered full disclosure. The unredacted footage was released on a Friday afternoon. By Saturday morning, it had been viewed 11 million times. By the following Wednesday, 47 million. Legal analysts on major news platforms broke it down frame by frame. Law school professors embedded it into their criminal procedure lectures. Civil rights organizations used it in community Know Your Rights seminars across 5 states. Some people online praised Marcus for staying calm and knowing his rights. Others criticized him, saying he should have simply complied without pushing back and handled it differently later. Some said the officers were just doing their job under pressure with limited information. Others said that limited information is precisely why the law requires individualized probable cause before you break someone's window. Both sides were loud. But here's what absolutely nobody could dispute. Marcus Webb was right about every single thing he said during those 11 minutes. In the 6 months following the incident, the Decatur Police Department made a series of documented policy changes. Officers were required to complete a new legal standards training module covering vehicle stop procedures, property destruction thresholds, and the legal requirements for warrantless searches in the context of radio dispatch descriptions. The department also introduced a mandatory verbal confirmation protocol, requiring officers to confirm suspect status with dispatch before escalating any stop beyond initial contact. Incident report training was updated to explicitly address the requirement for full disclosure of all material events, including conversations between officers at the scene. Essentially, they made their entire patrol division take the kind of training course that Marcus Webb could have designed from memory. After the footage went viral, 4 other residents of the Decatur area came forward with accounts of similar stops involving vehicle descriptions and immediate property damage with no prior consent or confirmed suspect identity. Turns out this wasn't a one-time decision made on a bad night. There was a pattern, a culture of escalate first, verify later that had gone unchallenged for years because most people didn't know what Marcus knew and didn't have what Marcus had. Documentation, vocabulary, calm, and a 31-page complaint ready by 9:30 the same night. This raises a question that deserves to sit with you for a moment. How many people experienced exactly what Marcus experienced and walked away with a broken window, no answers, and no recourse simply because they didn't know what they were legally entitled to say? Marcus Webb left Holloway and Greene 8 months after the incident and enrolled full-time in law school at Georgia State University School of Law. He was accepted with a partial scholarship. He now volunteers twice a month with a community legal education program that teaches residents of South Atlanta their rights during police encounters. He speaks at universities, community centers, and public defender offices. His own case, Webb v. City of Decatur, was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. His attorney confirmed only that Marcus was satisfied with the outcome and that a portion of the settlement was donated to the legal aid fund at his former employer. As for Derek Callahan, he has not returned to law enforcement. According to publicly available records, he currently works in private security. He has not made any public statements about the incident. Here's a question for you. If you were in Marcus's exact position that night, 3 patrol cars, officers surrounding you, a baton coming toward your window, would you have handled it the same way? I want your honest answer in the comments, because let's talk about what this story is actually about. On the surface, it looks like a story about a cop who made a bad call on a high-pressure night. But it isn't. Not really. This story is about the enormous gap between what the law says and what people in the moment believe they can get away with. It's about the quiet assumption that most people won't know enough to push back. And it's about what happens specifically, precisely, and permanently when that assumption turns out to be wrong. Most people do not know the legal threshold required before an officer can destroy private property. Most people do not know the difference between a general vehicle description and individualized probable cause. Most people do not know that saying, "Am I being detained or am I free to go?" is not aggression. It is a legally protected question that demands a legally precise answer. And some authority figures, not all, but some operate in full awareness of that knowledge gap. They count on it. They rely on it. They have built habits and patterns and shortcuts around the assumption that the person in front of them simply won't know better. When you encounter someone like Marcus, someone who spent 6 years immersed in exactly this world, who knows the case law, who can cite the amendment, who keeps his voice calm while the glass falls around him, the entire calculation changes. The badge doesn't automatically end the conversation. The uniform doesn't automatically mean compliance. Knowledge becomes the single most powerful thing in the room. Let's address the criticism that came up most frequently after this story went viral. A significant number of people online said that Marcus was being difficult, that he was escalating a situation that didn't need to be escalated, that he should have just stayed quiet, complied fully, and sorted it out later through proper channels. They said his approach put him at unnecessary risk. Here's the reality that the footage makes impossible to ignore. Marcus did comply. He pulled over correctly. He raised his hands without being asked twice. He stepped out when instructed. He placed his hands on the roof without argument. At no point did he raise his voice, reach for anything, or make any movement that could reasonably be interpreted as threatening. What he did not do is surrender rights that the law explicitly preserved for him. Those are not the same thing. As for the argument that he should have handled it quietly later, that argument assumes that later would have looked like something. It assumes there would have been a record detailed enough to matter. It assumes someone would have reviewed the footage without being prompted by a 31-page legal brief arriving the next morning. History suggests that later often looks like nothing at all. Yes, there is a real and serious risk that comes with asserting your rights during a high-pressure police encounter. Marcus knew that risk. He felt it. He calculated it in real time, and he decided that his dignity and the dignity of everyone who would come after him was worth it. But the fact that knowing your rights and saying so out loud is considered a dangerous act, that fact alone tells you more about the problem than anything else in this story. So what do we actually take from Marcus's story? First, document everything you possibly can before, during, and immediately after any encounter with authority. Marcus's phone in the cup holder, quietly recording from the moment the lights appeared in his mirror, was not an accident. It was a habit. Second, knowing your rights is not the same as being confrontational. Marcus never raised his voice. He never insulted anyone. He simply spoke the law out loud, calmly and clearly, and let the law do what it is designed to do. Third, the quality of your follow-up matters as much as the encounter itself. A verbal complaint disappears. A 31-page legally cited document with time-stamped evidence attached does not. Fourth, calm is a form of power. In every high-pressure situation, the person who controls their emotional response controls the narrative. Marcus never lost that control, not even when he heard his window shatter. Fifth, accountability doesn't always come automatically. It comes when someone who knows how to demand it shows up and does exactly that. Systems do not reform themselves. People push them. One man, one drive home, 11 minutes. And a police department that has never operated the same way since. That's the power of preparation. That's the importance of knowing exactly who you are and what you're entitled to, especially in the moments when someone is betting that you don't. That's what happens when knowledge meets pressure and refuses to flinch. Final question for you. What is one thing you learned from Marcus's story that you didn't know before? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video gave you something, a fact, a feeling, a reason to look something up, please share it, because this kind of story doesn't just belong to Marcus. It belongs to every person who has ever sat in a car on a quiet street and felt the lights come on behind them and wondered quietly whether they were going to be okay. This story matters because it is not just about Marcus Webb and Derek Callahan on a Tuesday evening in Decatur, Georgia. It is about every person who has ever been stopped without cause and had no language for what was happening to them. It is about every community that has been told explicitly or implicitly that compliance and surrender are the same thing. It is about every record that was never filed, every window that was never paid for, every apology that was never given, because the person on the other side of that encounter didn't know what Marcus knew. Marcus's story shows that you can be surrounded and still be standing. You can lose a window and still win. You can be face down on the pavement and stand back up, take a breath, and build something out of it that outlasts the moment entirely. Not every story ends this way. Not every encounter results in accountability. Not every voice gets recorded, and not every recording gets released, and not every release changes anything. But this one did, and that matters more than we can fully measure from here, out loud.